Hello and welcome to the second episode of Lisbon Investment Society's podcast, Crunch the Numbers. My name is David Tita and I will be your host for today as we dive into the world of finance. In this episode, we'll discuss how interest rates are affecting investment decisions and economic recoveries, and also a bit about the path that led to the position ISEG is in today. Our guest is former president of ISEG and regent of the Masters in Finance, Professor João Duque. Hello, Professor. Welcome to our show. It's really a pleasure to have you. So, firstly, I would like to ask you, what do you consider to be the greatest milestones of your career?
Thank you for interviewing me. And to start, a very good question, because this is something that is quite difficult to answer. Actually, I think that one of the most important decisions in my career was to assume that I would like to be a teacher. And then, in order to be a teacher in the university, I had to take my PhD. So when I decided to submit my application form to a UK university in order to do my PhD there, I think that was my milestone in my professional life. And then, of course, on that day, I decided that, yes, I want to be a teacher, so I want to leave my enrollments that I have with my some institutions like companies. I worked by the time in Galp. I was director there. And then I decided that I'd like to leave and abandon the firm and to learn something about something. I was not so sure about the specific topic, but I knew that I wanted to do some research in finance. And then I sent an application form to several universities. I was called for the first one that called me was the Manchester Business School. And then I accepted it because it was a very good school by the time and still is today. And then I just had to move to England and with my family by the time. And then that was my cornerstone, I'd say. And it's quite important because since then, it really pushed me to a lot of different opportunities and challenges, not only in the school, not only in the academic career, but also in the practitioner life, because I never left the idea of to be quite involved with the real world, although I love to do some research and to be in the academia, but I really like to do it in a mixed environment, in a more real environment, in order to feel what finance is and what is economics first, and where finance is a component of, and then how can I be within this small world, and to understand that, because my idea when I studied finance was that to understand finance. So I started to think that I'd love to understand it, and then to be somehow helpful to the society, doing some interesting topics of research.
Sounds wonderful, Professor. So your path as a teacher led you to be president of ISEG from 2009 to 2012. So what do you think has improved the most since you ended your mandate?
Well, let me just correct, because my mandate was between 2009 and 2014. And actually was a bit more extended than the 4 years because it should ended at 13, but it was extended because one important, very relevant issue by the time was the merger between two universities, so previous called University of Lisbon and the Technical University of Lisbon. And in 2013, so 12-13, we started the discussions and the studies that ended up by merging these two universities in the new University of Lisbon, and I was in the root of this creation. So I have I think I had a positive role in this process, leading to the actual University of Lisbon. And so we had to do a lot of things. We had to prepare all the path, all the regulations, all the statutes, all the arrangements that had to be done. And so the decision was to keep in power all the presidents or directors of the schools or faculties of the both universities until the process was ended, and then we had the new election. So I think that actually the school, when I took over my presidency, I think what I did most interestingly was to try to keep or replace ISEG into the spotlight. ISEG was the unique school of economics ages ago, was the first school of economics in Portugal. For ages it was a monopoly. Then we had other schools showing up, like in Porto, and then other schools started to be launched in Coimbra, Nova, Ischte, and so on. So I had a lot of schools, Católica, and so. But all these were, I would say, or the majority of them were built upon the teachers and the faculty that was educated in ISEG, basically. So ISEG is like the mother of all the schools of economics. And with this idea that we were so important that we wouldn't care to ask or to call attention, because the school thought that we don't need to call attention because we are the school. I think we lost a lot of attention, public attention, and especially self-esteem also. And this, I think that I try to improve, to change the path. And so I think that I started a way that is now very clear. ISEG became a very noticed school in Portugal. So we also started a new reorganization of the school because a new law came into power and we have to reorganize the school. But anyway, with the accreditation processes, international accreditation process that I restarted, because I thought it was very important that all the international boards could analyze and be sure that we are actually a very, very good school. And in order of that, I relaunched the process of the AACSB accreditation process, which came into effect quite recently. And then from that AACSB accreditation process, we could apply for the accreditation or the recognition of the Financial Times. And Financial Times recognized, we just submitted one course, which is the Master in Finance, and the Financial Times recognizes one of the best Masters in Finance in Europe. And this is it's a process that I started. I tried to reopen the school, put it under the spotlight, and I think that it was well succeeded. And also the students, I tried to celebrate with the students our victories, and this is very important. And we did it very strongly under my mandate, and after that, all my successors had developed that. And nowadays, for me, it's very rewarding when the academic year is completed to see the awarded ceremony, annual awarded ceremony of the degrees to be implemented. That something that it didn't exist before. So I started that, and now it's a must, and the school does it in a very proud way, in a very sophisticated way, in a very ceremonial, and that's something that I think it's a way to tell the students how proud we are for their development and their achievements. And we, as teachers, we all knew that, and we given that as a given. It's given. Of course, we are happy with the students' success, but we didn't show that before. As I told before, we given as achieved that the school was good, and so I think these were the main contributions that I tried to implement. Aside with a very strong drive supporting the idea that research is a basic and a fundamental distinction of the universities when compared with the polytechnic education, and it's why I think that we strongly started a program of putting a lot of efforts in the recognition of research in ISEG as a way to promote my colleagues and the faculty members, so, and as well as to drive some students into the world of research. And this is something that now it's very clear and evident.
Well, as a student, I can only say thank you for the recognition and the hard work. So as a current regent of the Masters in Finance, do you feel that Portugal is interesting enough or has enough opportunities to keep our graduates in the country?
Well, that's a very good question, and it depends a lot of different factors, and some of them are absolutely out of our scope and length. So I'd say that we can. It's because it's there is somehow a process of globalization that it's very challenging for the universities, and there is a new paradigm of in the higher education, new technologies, the distance learning process, the asynchronous teaching and learning. All these aspects are quite challenging in the way we now teach in order to serve the community, that the professional community where our students will be integrated. And so we need first to change the way we teach in order to fulfill the interests of those that welcome our students. But we also need those from the other side, from the demand side, to be ready to absorb our students and to keep them in Portugal. And that's quite difficult. So first, I don't care. I could say I don't care if my students leave ISEG to stay in Portugal or abroad. I want them well placed in doing a very nice job when they are playing their roles in financial institutions. That's the most important thing, especially if you have a way, if you have a conception of the world, and especially in the European area, that it's not so close as my interest is Portugal. But of course, I'd like to see Portugal as a country of something noticed in the area of finance. Our financial institutions are not big institutions, so it's not easy for them to accommodate a lot of students that are ready to be integrated in the employment world. But I'd say that I'd like to see some specialization in some of the institutions, and to see our political or our policy of welcoming foreign investment as a way to associate it to the finance world, and to have more projects like the BNP Paribas. BNP Paribas is a very good example of an institution, international institution, that placed their offices, a lot of offices in Portugal, in order to serve the world of the BNP Paribas world. And so a lot of students can work within those offices and serve what they are being educated for. So in a way, I'd like to, it's difficult to answer, to be very clear and transparent to your question. It's difficult, it's possible, but the main interest is to educate well our students in order to put them in a very good position to develop their careers in a very decent way, not only in technical or analytical terms, but also in ethical terms. And I'm sure that your students leave ISEG, for instance, in the Master in Finance, with a very, very good technical expertise. I know better than other institutions, sometimes with better reputation.
Well, now shifting more to an economic perspective, which countries do you think will recover from the current crisis the fastest? And looking at Portugal in particular, how effective do you think the government reacted to the COVID-19 crisis? And what could have been done to further help or improve the economic outlook?
I'd like to avoid to choose specific countries because we are not at the end. At the end of the story, we'll see. This is very much linked with the health problem and the health solution. And I'm not a doctor of medicine. I'm a doctor in finance, not in medicine. So I don't like to cover things that I do not know, or I'm not expert enough to. But because you know that there is a strategies that leave the economy running the way and leave the health problem to develop, and we'll see at the end what's the best path, what was the best path. And I don't want to take part on that dispute. Anyway, what I feel is that the Portuguese government played very well the role when we shut down, when we tried to supply the cash to firms. There, I think we did well. What we did not well was when we reopened the economy. The reopening is not very well succeeded because we failed in a very significant aspect, which is maybe not the number of cases, maybe not the way the disease was spread. That's not the problem. The problem was the way we worked the news, and we did not set a very clear path and very clear instructions to people in order to confine in a very rigorous way the spread of the disease. And that turned into, put Portugal under fire. So even yesterday, I knew that a new country, Ireland, I presume, put Portugal in the blacklist, meaning that actually we are not doing our job properly. And we know that actually I don't feel uncomfortable living home, not at all. I booked my holidays in Algarve. I'm hoping to do it. Even yesterday, I went to Porto. I stood in a hotel and I came back. I don't feel afraid at all because I don't feel that panic being around in Portugal. I take my measures of health, say, social rules of distancing and protection and so on. But and I don't feel any uncomfortable. I go to restaurants, I go to public places, I sleep in hotels. So I believe that the practitioners are doing their best in order to clean, to keep the places, the premises healthy. So and it's why I think that the image that we are now transmitting to the outside of the country is very negative, and it's a problem, and we didn't deal with that properly. And this means that we will have a lot of problems, because the tourism, the weight of the tourism in economic activity in Portugal is about 14%. Of course, if a lot of Portuguese don't travel abroad because we had to suffer the quarantine, it doesn't mean, and no one wants to spend 2 weeks not traveling, because if I want to visit UK, I have to be inside a hotel 2 weeks in order to come back. So what's the sense to travel to the UK? None. So having said that, what I'd say that yes, some Portuguese staying in Portugal will mitigate the crisis of the tourism, but it's not enough. So that's why I think that we have a specific problem, and that problem has to be dealt with the most, I'd say, the deterministic and strong way to overcome that. Otherwise, we'll risk a lot, and we risk a second wave of the disease, and it's a nightmare, and it's an economic disaster. And then this will put Portugal completely aside of Europe, and we are a bit on that direction, not in real terms of the disease, but in economic terms, and I feel uncomfortable. So I hope that will change. This will change in a question of weeks, because all these numbers and figures that are coming out change every week. But anyway, I dislike a lot what I see. And in a final word, I would say that the worst I can see is the inconsistency of the measures that are taken. No one understands why you can travel packed in a bus, and there is no problem with that. But you can, if you want to access to a beach, you have to take one door, a gate to the beach. It's odd. And if you want to exit, take another gate. It's ridiculous. And if you are in open air, you cannot be together, but you can be packed in a bus. Or you can sit inside an airplane, but you cannot sit in a restaurant. This is crazy. No one understands this, and everybody feels that it's a lie. So if it's a lie, no one will accomplish with the rules. And it's why I think that it's a bit unorganized, and this is the result.
So looking at the current context of very low interest rates, do you think it brings more advantages or disadvantages for countries to recover from the current crisis?
For the time being, absolutely advantages, because we don't suffer a problem of inflation. By the contrary, so we need money to increase pumping money. Well, using the monetary policy, so we pump money. Well, first, so ideally, and to stimulate investments. So lowering interest rates is good for that. What are the main problems? I see two problems. The first one is the savings. So you actually are not compensating the savings. You are not stimulating savings. And Portugal has a problem, has a traditional problem with saving rates. We are relying on foreign savings to fund our investment needs. And this is a problem because, first, those savings that we use from foreigners are in a form of debt, and then we have to pay back the interest. And this means that the flow, the cash flow, the yield of the debt has in some way to come back, to be sent back to the origins of the capital. So the interests that are paid to the debt in the service of the debt have to flow back to the origin countries. And second, the profits, the earnings that are then paid as a form of dividends, of course, they also go back, they flow back to their original countries. And this means that actually the value added that is created in Portugal by those new investments, a lot of that value added flows to other countries, and we don't keep that yield that is created in Portugal, meaning that we work, we get salaries, we get wages paid, but not more than that. So it's a problem, and the very low interest rates do not stimulate the savings. So it's a problem. Another problem that can be created with this monetary policy are the bubbles. So some markets, some sub-markets, not the entire market, but some markets, because, well, liquidity doesn't spread uniformly for all the agents in the economy. That's the problem. So you see that, like, it's like pouring water on top of a table. You imagine that you have a table, okay? If you have a table of snooker, the water flows and drops into some holes, right? So, and if the table is a bit unbalanced, it means that some holes will be filled up with more liquidity than the others, and that's the problem. So the surface of the table is not uniform, and you have some holes where there is an accumulation of liquidity, and you observe that in real estate in some countries, or in prices of shares in the capital markets, or sometimes some gold, if you look at gold or something. So that's a problem, to create some bubbles in specific markets. But then you have the regulators have to deal with that, and to be careful, and to take advantage of the tax policies in order to readjust these effects. But in a sense, in a word, I would say that we have more positive gains in general in Europe than as negatives. It's my view for the time being.
Yeah. So as a final question, given the fact that they are so low, where do you think investors should be looking for an alternative? So high yields that grant them the lowest risk possible.
Okay, for traditional investors or savers, I would recommend some structured deposits. Okay, structured deposits, it's a new wave of deposits, because they are deposits like fixed term deposits. They are guaranteed by the system as the other deposits. So they are covered by the general guaranteeing system of deposits, but they return floating. They have a floating return. It's a return that is not guaranteed, as opposite with the traditional deposits, where you have an interest rate and it's guaranteed. The guarantee of this deposit is given by the bank where you deposit the money, and they have different structured deposits depending on different underlying assets like baskets of shares or commodity, the price of commodities or stock indices, whatever. And you can improve a bit the yields. And you can get sometimes 2%, 2.5%. It depends. It depends on the structured products and the institutions. And you have to look around. Because this product is interesting, they have been developed by the banks, and they are spread around by several banks in Portugal. And it's a way to do investment under the guarantee of the deposit, the system of guarantees of deposits. And then you have other investments. I'm not supposed to do financial advising, but in economic terms, we are in a crisis, and it's quite clear for all economists that it's a simple rule that the crisis will not live forever. So if you want to invest in sectors, for instance, I'm not saying that you should buy shares, but there are sectors where I feel that the future will touch it in a positive way. And when the sectors there where Europe is very much, I would say, focused to develop is the digital economy, or the recycling economy, or the renewable energies, or even leisure. Because human beings will be affected by, we hope, robots. So robots will take, we hope, that will take most of our hard work. And so human beings, I think, hope to spend less time working and more time for leisure. And so leisure activity will be in the future, not at the actual moment, but in the future, it will be a very significant activity for those that supply goods and services to the leisure consumption. So I'd say these are, and of course, health and safety. So I say that these areas, I believe, will be the future. And if you want to invest in the very long term, like you, in your age, if I was you, I would invest on those areas, because I believe that those areas will have a future. Other areas will be under serious stress, and the outcome is very, or potentially very negative, but I will not cover those. So I leave you with a hope.
Well, thank you very much, Professor, for your answers and your time. It was really a pleasure to have you here. Let me just, on a final note, encourage our listeners to follow us. We are this episode will be available on Spotify on audio, and for the first time on YouTube, we'll have our video chat with the professor. So I would encourage you to also see that on that platform. Any final note you would like to give our listeners, Professor?
Just to hope their best, not only in health terms, but also in financial terms.
Well, thank you very much for coming, and then we'll see you next time.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you for interviewing me.